Hello and welcome to Sharon Local History. In this video I want to take you for a small trip to Medfield, Massachusetts, and I visited a huge complex that was Medfield State Hospital. Originally it was the Medfield Insane Asylum. It was a huge psychiatric care complex. It is located on 45 Hospital Road in Medfield. The asylum was built in 1895 and closed down in 2003. Unlike any other places that were abandoned, this one is actually open to visitors and you can go and visit the grounds. It's really impressive place. You will be probably speechless. It's a huge park with lots of buildings, as you can see in those videos. So visitors are welcome. However, please come between sun up and sundown and keep your dogs on the leash and be safe. Don't enter the buildings. They are all boarded up, as you can see. However, even the police is keeping an eye on this property. So it is a huge place. It's over 128 acres. When it was opened and at height of its operation, it had 58 buildings. About 10 years ago, there were still about 44 buildings, and the square footage added to 660,000 square feet. Now, in 2020s, there are about 35 brick buildings. Just to let you know, the capacity was over 2,300 patients. But the whole complex was built only for 1,000, so it basically doubled its capacity. The roofs are made out of slate, and I do admit I saw some loose ones. So again, be careful and enter on your own risk, really. The whole complex was added to National Register of Historic Places in 1984. So I would like to tell you a little bit about the history. It was formerly renamed Medfield State Hospital in 1914. It began operating in 1892 and it opened its doors in 1896 and closed in 2003. It was built originally as a psychiatric institution, but it had really overwhelming character. It's huge. You will be really impressed when you see it. It was supposed to take care of large amounts of men and women who were mentally ill. Basically, the unique structure of it, or the architecture plan, is called cottage plan layout. It's different than any other institutions before. I think I read somewhere there was actually a first one in the United States. So rather than the large buildings of the famous asylums you saw in the movies or in person that were large, long buildings, this one had a cottage plan. So the idea was to make a little bit more home-like, but also separate the patients by their diagnosis. They tried to make it a little bit more home-like, so people were sleeping on the second floor, and on the first floor, on the ground floor, they had sitting rooms and different workrooms. During 1930s and 1940s, the hospital became overcrowded with 2,300 patients. Yet, just to remind you, it was built for 1,000. The population itself actually at that time was bigger than population of the town Medfield. Unfortunately, we can hear of different accounts of abuse, injuries to residents by staff, as well as death. I think I read somewhere that they had 4 deaths a month, so once a week, 1 person a week. That's pretty sad. However, not all treatment was bad, and there were some great experiences. I was told that the uniqueness of this place was that the residents were able to walk outside, work in the gardens, take care of the grounds. They had a huge farm close by where the patients were working as well. There was also art therapy and other positive treatments. In the 1950s, all the kind of old-fashioned barbaric treatments like electric shock therapy were banned, and the psychiatric drugs evolved a lot. So in 1950s, new psychotropic drugs were used, and they were introduced to healthcare as well as those mental institutions, and they really drastically changed the way mentally ill were treated. The best part that came out of it was that many patients were able to be discharged, and their family could take care of them if they were fortunate to have a family. Under the leadership of Dr. Harold Lee, Medfield gained national recognition for its rehabilitation program, which incorporated a step system of increasing independent living situations on campus and a vocational program to increase work skills for transition into the community. In the early 1960s, Congress passed a law requiring that all mental health patients in the United States be housed or hospitalized in the least restrictive environment possible. By the mid-1970s, most of the patients were moved out of the hospital to community-based half houses. From 1970s to its closing, the population dropped to under 200 people, and then the state basically closed the hospital. The final closure happened in 2003. I would like to tell you a little bit about the staff and how it worked. So there were hundreds: support staff, doctors, nurses, and psychiatric personnel. At its height, there were almost 1,000, so 500 to 900 at the time. At first, the staff worked on the wards and lived with the patients, usually sleeping in the attics of the buildings where they worked. In 1902, Medfield opened a 2-year training program for nurses, which later became a 3-year program. In 1914, with students affiliated at Boston City Hospital. It was in 1902 that the hospital joined the other facilities as an admission and treatment center rather than a transfer institution to relieve overcrowding at the other facilities. In addition to the adult patients, there were also 6 to 10 emotionally disturbed children admitted to the facility, the youngest just 4 years old. Another great part, actually, of this huge complex was a little farm that they built. So farming took place on hundreds of acres of land surrounding the campus. The farmhouse was built across what is now Hospital Road. It was called Canal Street in 1901. And it served as living quarters for the head farmer and his family, as well as 14 farm hands and 30 patients. The farm played an important role in the lives of the patients and the economy of the hospital until farming was stopped in the late 1960s. For many years, the produce and the milk from the dairy herds supplied food and milk for the residents, not only at Medfield, but for many of the surrounding state institutions as well. So if you look at the present, I think I mentioned it that the complex was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1994, and the property closed in 2003, and some buildings were removed and some were shuttered. The grounds have been restored and reopened to public and are open every day from sun up to sundown. The whole complex was actually used in many movies because it's pretty incredible. Seen in a movie called The Shutter Island and The Box, as well as The New Mutants. Actually, Knives Out as well. Within the grounds of the hospital is a small cemetery which has got 84 grave sites. The cemetery was open from 1918 and it closed in 1988. This is the place where 841 people lay to rest. It was people that didn't have anybody to take them home. So when the Medfield State Hospital opened in 1896, the residents that died were buried in the Medfield Wine Lake Cemetery on the knoll across from Cemetery Pond, and apparently there are 520 hospital residents who died between 1896 and 1918. The hospital burials stopped at the Wine Lake Cemetery in 1918 when Medfield and the rest of the world were hit hard with the influenza epidemic. So influenza swept around the world, killing over 20 million people. According to historians, it made 1/4 to 1/2 of the world population ill. 17 residents died during the period from September 1918 to October 1918. At the state hospital, the influenza had devastating effects. 73 employees were ill in one day. The superintendent and 2 assistants also contracted the disease. The disease spread to over 300 patients. 55 died in one day. And at that point, town of Medfield was faced with mass burials, and the town pressured the state to build their own cemetery. That's when they decided to build a state hospital cemetery overlooking Charles River. As I mentioned, there are over 841 gravestones. However, they are just really small squares, 4x4, that had a number on them, and there were no names, no dates at all. However, in 2005, the Medfield State Hospital Cemetery Restoration Committee was formed, and Boy Scouts took it on as their Eagle Scout project to clean and the whole debris. There was tons of grass, some of the gravestones weren't visible, so they actually did an incredible job restoring the cemetery, and they also added appropriate granite stone markers that have name and dates on them. They did tons of research, incredible research with the birth and death dates and the names. It looks pretty good now, and I'm very thrilled that somebody actually had the idea to restore the cemetery. So this is the end of the video. I do hope that you learned something and you will have a chance to visit this incredible place. There are lots of plans for restoring it and bringing new life to this place. There's talk of apartments as well as some kind of art center. The most up-to-date information is on the Town of Medfield website, so you can check it out there. Thank you for watching this video, and thank you for watching Sharon Local History.